Let's talk about increases today. I use 5 favorite increases for all of my Westknits patterns, and they are the make one right and left, the knit front back, the yarn over, make one using a backwards loop, and make one by knitting into the back of the stitch from the row below. Whoa, what does that even mean? Where do you do these increases, and what do they look like? Well, I'm going to show you how to do each one and share why you would use it for a design or for following a pattern, and when to substitute these increases. So let's dive into these increases and take a closer look. Let's start easy with a knit front back. Knit into the front and back of one stitch, just like that. I love this increase because it's so quick, really easy to knit, and it's perfect for garter stitch and seed stitch. Let's do that one more time, holding the yarn in your right hand, knit into the front and back of the stitch. I use this increase in garter stitch and seed stitch because it blends in with the fabric really nicely. Here is the knit front back, knit in garter stitch, and because garter stitch is so bumpy, you don't notice the bump that you achieve from the knit front back. If you work the knit front back in stockinette stitch, you're going to see this extra little bump right here, 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 and here. But in garter stitch, it just hides into the fabric. So for seed stitch and garter stitch, knit front back is the way to go. Let's do a yarn over. A yarn over, you just place the yarn on top of the right needle and keep on going. Yarn over. This increase is really quick, really easy to do, and it gives you a hole in the fabric. You can use that hole to your advantage in shawls like the Slumber Shawl, shown here, and it makes those beautiful little polka dot yarn over eyelets that decorate the fabric. Really beautiful, and it's really visible to give you that see-through moment in the fabric. If you're working a purl stitch, and then the yarn is in front, you can yarn over and bring the yarn in front to purl again. Let's do that for you English style knitters, holding the yarn in your right hand. You just purl the stitch, the yarn is in front, wrap the yarn around the needle for a yarn over, and purl the next stitch. Really quick, really smooth. The yarn over is very visible. If you don't want a visible yarn over, you could try the make one increase by doing a backwards loop cast on method. So this is a make one using a backwards loop cast on, just like that. You twist the yarn and it goes onto the right needle. If you do the backwards loop make one, you can twist the yarn with your right hand, like that. And it doesn't matter which direction you twist the yarn. You could also twist it towards you, as long as you're getting that little lock, that little overlap with the yarn. Make one increase. This increase is also really good for stockinette stitch or any textured stitch pattern. I used the make one increase for this painting brick shawl, and it happens right here. You can't hardly even see it. It's really great to use the make one increase when you're starting a new color in a new right side row. So with your new color, right here is that make one twist. It's also quite invisible and hidden, but it's not as tight as the increase that I'm about to show you. So the make one, you could substitute that instead of a knit front back, or you could do a make one with that backwards loop cast on instead of a yarn over. I use the make one a lot with the backwards loop cast on. It's a really good increase to substitute instead of doing other increases. Let's do the tightest increase. If you want a solid fabric with no holes, really tight and tidy, make one left and make one right is the way to go. For a make one left, we need to lift this ladder between the stitches by going into the front of it. So always use the left needle to pick up the stitch. I left the front door open. Make one left, go through the front, and then twist that stitch. Let's do that one more time. Make one left. I left the front door open, and then twist that stitch by going through the back loop. If you hold the yarn in your right hand, make one left. Go into the front door and twist that stitch. A make one right goes the other way. Make one right. I'll be right back. Right, go into the back. So for make one right, I'll be right back. Go into the back of that little ladder and twist the stitch by knitting into the front. One more time, I'll be right back. Go into the back of the stitch and twist it by knitting into the front. If that stitch feels a little bit too tight as you're going into the front of the make one right stitch, oh, I can't get my needle through. Loosen it up first, and then you have space to knit through the front loop to twist it. That's going to make a really tight and tidy increase. So we have make one rights happening here and make one lefts happening here. You can hardly even see where those increases occur. There's no spaces in the fabric. It's really tight and tidy. So use that make one left and right for a tight fabric. If it feels too tight to do that make one left and right, then feel free to substitute with the backwards loop cast on. I love that backwards loop cast on. It just saves your projects from having to think too hard about right, left, which one is which. But use that saying, I left the front door open, I'll be right back, and that's where the left needle inserts. Okay, let's do one more increase. Knitting into the back of the stitch from the row below. This is a make one increase where you go into the back of the stitch from the row below. So insert the right needle into that stitch from the row below and knit through it. This increase is best for stockinette stitch. So I have a little bit of stockinette stitch right here, and it doesn't really matter if you go into the back of the stitch on the right needle or on the left needle. Some patterns will say and direct you which stitch to do. In my patterns, I don't say exactly to do this one or to do this one. So it's up to you, whatever's easiest. Knit into the back of the stitch from the row below and keep on knitting. Let's do that one more time here. You could pick up that stitch and knit it. Same technique, just from a little bit different stitch perspective. But this stitch will also be quite closed and hidden. Pick up that stitch and knit it. Not this stitch, but you go into the stitch below and knit that. And it also creates a really invisible increase. I did that make one by knitting into the back of the stitch from the row below in this top-down raglan sweater. And look at that, there's no spaces where that increase occurs. It's really smooth and stockinette stitch, and it's not too tight. So I really love that increase for stockinette stitch fabric. That's my go-to. Knit into the back of the stitch from the row below. Let's check out some of the samples that feature those 5 increases. Here are the increase locations in the Painting Chevrons shawl. This has a make one right, make one left, right, left to slant away from that center spine of the point. Again, if you don't like that make one right or make one left, you could substitute a backwards loop cast on method and see how that looks in your fabric. But I use the make one right and left for my increase points to get a really solid, very crispy fabric for painting chevrons. Dotted rays uses yarn overs to shape the fabric. There are double yarn overs in the center of this shawl, which is really fun and exaggerated to get that wholly decorative effect in the simple garter stitch fabric. This is one of the easier Westknits shawls to knit, but it's really fun with the short rows and the unique construction. It begins at the top center right here, and it fans out with those double yarn overs. And I put a knit front back increase at the edge of this shawl because knit front backs are perfect for garter stitch or seed stitch. You don't really notice the bump that is created from that knit front back. The knit front back is also a little bit more flexible than a make one right or left, so that helped my edge a little bit. It's not too tight. And those double yarn overs, oh, they just steal the show. Here are a few more moments of that knit front back. This is the Vertices Unite shawl, so there are knit front back increases along some of the edges of this shawl, and you can't really see those increases. They don't make a hole, the edges aren't too tight, so knit front back is a really a favorite for my garter stitch fabrics. Vertices Unite is knit with 5 colors of yarn, and it's color blocked and striped, a really great pattern to practice your short row and increase techniques. Let's look at some Make One increases. The yoke of the Painting Brick sweater uses the Make One using a backwards loop cast-on method. I use this increase for a lot of my top-down sweaters because you can't see any holes. You can't see the spaces, you can't see where those increases are happening, and that's the point. I especially like the backwards loop cast-on method for color work. Whenever you're starting a new color, you do that backwards loop cast-on, and I don't have much to show you. You can't see it, and that's the point of the backwards loop cast-on. It happens throughout the yoke, and it's so magically seamless and invisible. Here's one more top-down sweater called the Westknits Go-To Raglan. It has increases at the raglan locations right here. This is a stockinette stitch fabric, so I played with that Make One increase where you're knitting into the back of the stitch from the row below. And it's also quite invisible, and it doesn't give you a hole or a space in the fabric. And if it does, that you might have a looser yarn or a looser tension. So if you do get a hole or a space in that increase location, you could try the Make One Right or the Make One Left. But play around with the increases and see which ones work best for you for each individual project. But I always recommend the increase that I used for my sample. Lastly, let's look at some of those yarn overs. This Slumber Shawl is a really easy Westknits project because it's knit with thicker yarn. You can use 4 shades of DK or worsted weight yarn to knit the Slumber Shawl. And look at those yarn overs in the center. What I love about yarn overs is that they're functional, they give you that increase, and they also decorate the fabric. So as you play with the increases and the repeats and the rhythms of the shawl, they make beautiful motifs to decorate the fabric in an effortless way. Yarn overs are easy to work, very quick, but they also add a fluidity and drape to the fabric. So with this thicker yarn, it's really quick to knit, but that thick fabric is still quite drapey thanks to those yarn overs. Oh wow, that was a lot. I don't do all those increases in one project, okay? So pick and choose. Which one was your favorite increase? Do you usually gravitate towards one over the other? I'd love to hear what increases you love, so you can profess your love in the comments down below. And is there an increase I missed? Am I missing out on an increase? Because those are like all the increases I use. So let me know if you prefer another one. There's no right way to do a knitting technique. There's always another way. So mix and match those techniques. And all the patterns shared in this video will be linked down below. So you can pick your favorite patterns, share your progress on Instagram with #Westknits. And I need to learn some new techniques. I need to expand my toolbox of skills. So when I learn a few new things, you'll hear it here. I'll share some new techniques with you soon. So I'll see you in the next video.